For those who seek adventure, this is the Buffalo Roamer Podcast, sharing the people, places, and moments that make a life on the loose worth living.
The thing that's going to stick out to you most is when they open up that plane door. The cold is something like you've never felt.
The jungle's so thick, even if you had a machete, you couldn't get through it.
There's a huge blonde grizzly bear. And when it saw us, this thing put its head down, stomped on the ground, and hissed like an alligator.
I just crossed this brutal stretch of desert, and I was really suffering.
I'm your host, Will Collins. I'm an adventurer, outdoorsman, and roamer of wild places. I've backpacked the Brooks Range, rafted the Grand Canyon, and have canoed from source to sea, both the Mississippi and Yukon rivers. I live for adventure, travel, fresh air, and diving into the unknown. And now, I hope to share my passion with you on the Buffalo Roamer Podcast. Here we go, episode 87. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget, if you enjoy it, give us a 5-star rating on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really helps us. A few quick notes, too. We got guided canoe trips for summer and fall of 2024. A few spots still left at buffaloroamer.com. You can find the details or email me. Will@buffaloroamer.com is the email. I got 2 spots left on the Mississippi River Bluff Country Canoe Trip. It's a fully guided canoe trip on the Mississippi River in Wisconsin and Minnesota, one of my favorite sections of the Mighty Miss. Got some spots left for October Moab Green River trip. That's in Utah. Fabulous trip, one of the best in the country. And have some spots left as well for the Lower Wisconsin River this summer. All beautiful trips and amazing opportunities at buffaloroamer.com. You can get some of the details or email me for more details. Would love to get on the river with you. Today's podcast is brought to you by sregear.com and Fischel Paddles. Fischel is makers of fine handcrafted wooden canoe paddles, and SRE Gear is an outdoor gear shop in Black River Falls, Wisconsin, family owned and operated. Use code WILL at either of those sites, FischelPaddles.com or sregear.com, get a discount. Okay, today's podcast 87 is a good one. Trapper Haskins is on the podcast. Trapper is a musician. He's a woodworker, an outdoorsman, an author, and he took a rowboat down the mighty Mississippi River. So really enjoyed talking with him. His new book is out now. It's called Crooked Old River, Rowing Toward Redemption on the Mississippi. You can catch it at trapperhaskins.com, also available on Amazon. I read it. I really enjoyed it. And it's really well written. And of course, about the mighty Mississippi and a common theme here. So hope you enjoyed the conversation with Trapper Haskins on episode 87 of Buffalo Roamer Outdoors. Trapper, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. Doing great. Been listening to your show for several years, so it's an honor to be here.
Hey, that's awesome, man. I'm excited about it. We connected on social media a long time ago, I feel like, and recently, you're a man of many traits, but you recently came out with a book, which is I've had the good pleasure of reading most of. And awesome book, man. And you're kind of a man of many talents. So I want to talk about the book. I want to talk about who Trapper Haskins is and all kinds of fun stuff. But first, why don't you just set it up for me? Like who are you? Where am I talking to you? Where are you coming from? And give me a little breakdown about how you came to be on the Buffalo Roamer podcast.
Yeah, man. So today I'm coming from Thompson Station, Tennessee, which is where I live. With my family. We're about, 30 miles south of Nashville, now south of Franklin, Tennessee, and a pretty normal suburban existence, which has taken some getting used to, but here we are. But you and I guess we connected on Instagram, but like I said, I've been listening to the podcast for years, been a runner, been an endurance runner. And so I listen to podcasts while I'm running and, listening to people talk about doing things tougher than what I'm doing at the moment. I might be on mile 6 or 8 or something like that. And to hear somebody talk about paddling down the Yukon or whatever adventure they've gone on, it's sort of, sort of inspiration for me to keep going. So, I've been listening for a long time and I think we connected on Instagram, but I am professionally, I'm a trim carpenter and a woodworker, but I'm also a freelance writer. And since I live outside of Nashville, I'm also a musician. I think it's almost law around here that you have to be some sort of musician to live in the live in the orbit of Nashville, Tennessee. So
That's
yeah,
awesome, man. Well,
that's me in a nutshell. Yeah.
all that's cool, and looking forward about talking about it. But a couple things. I've listened to some of your tunes on Spotify. Been enjoying that, man, and diving into the book too. Anybody who's a John Hartford fan, and who, of course, has the title named at least in part after John Hartford, and John Hartford quotes in there. I was like, oh yeah, this guy's got it, man. I
Yeah.
love John
Yeah.
Hartford.
Yeah. I've been a Hartford fan for gosh, I can't remember who. Oh, so I was born and raised in Memphis, and I worked at a liquor store, and the old man who closed the store with me, I was in college at the time, and we would close the shop up about 10 o'clock and restock the shelves. And man, he introduced me to so much cool music. He's the one that introduced me to John Hartford and Gillian Welch and all that stuff. Like back in the 90s, we'd be restocking shelves, and he'd be like, "What do you mean you never heard of Guy Clark before? What do you mean you never heard of John Prine or whatever?" So he sort of turned me on to all that stuff. But John Hartford, being a fantastic musician, but also having a focus on a focus of a lot of his songs and albums are on the river. So it's just irresistible to me. His music is so good. And
Totally,
so
man.
the title is the title is from a line in the song, the Julie Bell Swain. There's a line that says, "Nothing like a crooked old river to straighten my head right out," and it felt like an apropos title for this book.
That's great, man. Yeah, I'm a diehard. I love John Hartford. It just connects, being an Illinois boy as well, and a Mississippi riverboat, and on the Illinois River,
Right.
and man, just the whole deal of it, and my favorite kind of music, bluegrass, and yeah, when I discovered him, it was like, oh boy, it's like a match made in heaven. So
Sure,
then,
sure. And I imagine you've seen the Julie Bell Swain at some point, right? You've seen the boat up
oh yeah,
in, I don't know where she is now. Is she up in, is it La Crosse?
I don't know
I
where it
think the
is,
Julie Bell
but
Swain's up in La
yeah,
Crosse.
you see
But
a
we
bunch of
were
those old steamboat types.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, when I was in college, I worked on the in Memphis. There's the Memphis Queen Line, which is I think there's three. It's a trio of sightseeing steamboats that aren't actually steamboats, but and they sort of parade up and down the Memphis waterfront, doing dinner cruises and daytime cruises and stuff. And so when I was in college, before I worked at that liquor store, I was working on those river boats, and that was sort of my first taste of. That was actually the first time I ever got on the Mississippi River. Growing up in Memphis, was as a deckhand on one of those river boats, and it just gives you a perspective of the city, where you're looking at what would have been back in the day. You're looking at the front door of the city, and nowadays the river's sort of the that's the backside of the city. But back in the day,
Yeah,
that was the front door, the front yard of the city was the cobblestones down there on the river. So that was my first taste of being on the river, and my first taste of the river before being on the river was, and I'm sure you've probably been there, Mud Island River Park in Memphis. There's a 2,000-foot long scale model of the Mississippi. And as a 7-8-year-old kid in Memphis, we would go down there during the summertime. My sister and I would get popsicles from the popsicle stand there, and as soon as as soon as we were done with them, we would take the little wooden stick and drop it in this scale model of the river, and basically just chase our popsicle stick down to the quote unquote Gulf of Mexico, which is a public pool at the end of this river walk. And that was sort of where I fell in love with the river. And then working on the river boats was where I first got on the river. And even when my wife and I got married and moved away from Tennessee up to New England, I just couldn't get the Mississippi out of my mind, even being 2,000 miles away.
It's awesome, man. And again, it resonates with me. I totally understand. And yeah, I guess that brings us, we might as well dive right into to your book, because you write about all that in this book. And I really enjoyed it, man. I think your writing is really, really vivid, which is cool. And so your book's out now. It's called Crooked Old River, Rowing Toward Redemption on the Mississippi. and it details your trip and kind of life surrounding the Mississippi, and a trip you took, I guess, kind of circa, I wrote down here, 2002 to 2018, right?
Right. Yeah, I like to say, we went down the river in a wooden rowboat, and the intention was the trip was going to take 90 days, and it took 16 years because, life got in the way and some stuff. But yeah, when my wife and I got married, we moved to Maine because I had sort of, being on the Mississippi River and being around boats, I'd sort of fallen in love with both boats, but the history of boats. And I had briefly worked in a fiberglass boatyard in Memphis. And I'm just the type of person where if I get sort of consumed with something, I kind of want to go back to chase the earlier versions of that. And so to get into wooden boats, there's not anything of the sort in West Tennessee, or at least where we were in Memphis. So I ended up moving to Maine 2 weeks after our wedding. We moved up to Maine, and I did a 2-year internship, an apprenticeship at a place called the Apprentice Shop. And the apprentice shop is in Rockland, Maine, right on Route 1. And so we were building lobster boats, and we were building rowboats, and we worked on some sailboats. And one night in December, I was in the school's library, and there was a book in there that had all of these early American workboats. And one of them was called the Mississippi River Yawl. And these plans were drawn in 1889 by the Army Corps of Engineers. They had taken the lines off of an existing boat, and it's an 18-foot rowboat with a flat bottom, flat sides, and she's got a 72-ish square foot sail. And I don't know if it was the fact that I had been away from Memphis for months and months at that point, or the fact that there was probably something on the order of 4 feet of snow on the ground in Maine that December, that I just got a little homesick. So here I was in a boat shop overlooking the North Atlantic and all this salt water. And all I wanted to do was build this boat and take it back home to my river. And so over the course of the next year and a half, during nights and weekends, in my instructor's garage at his house, I built this boat, and then my wife sewed the sail. And in 2002, we set out to take her all the way down the river the intention was to go from Itasca to the Gulf, but being a Memphis kid and only knowing the Mississippi River as this giant behemoth, I started seeing pictures of the headwaters and went, wait a minute, this rowboat with 9-foot oars is not going to fit on that river. So we borrowed a canoe to do the first 500 miles. And so the intention was to row this thing from St. Paul to the Gulf. You're right, the summer of 2002. And we got as far as New Orleans. And for a variety of reasons, the traffic, the weather, just feeling like I didn't know if I had anything else left to prove. I'd sort of proven to myself what I set out to do, or at least I thought I did. We were in our mid-20s at the time, no kids, no mortgage. We were just footloose and fancy free on the river. And so we walked away from it. And it wasn't until a decade and a half later that I really sort of came to a crossroads, sort of looking into the future and deciding who I was in the past and who I wanted to be. And ended up just telling my wife, we have to go back and finish the river. And the boat had been sitting in the backyard for 16 years. We had moved it from state to state with us. It just had not been in the water. And so this rowboat is rotting in the backyard, and I'm working an office job and sort of looking at my life like, how did you let yourself get into this position? But, when you're 25, you're just gonna, keep traveling forever. But when you're 40 years old and you've got kids to feed, you make decisions based on that. And so, just in an effort to sort of reconnect with who I was, we rebuilt the boat with my kids helping me. And then in 2018, put the boat back in the river exactly where we took it out in New Orleans. And it did not start out the way it was supposed to start out. But we ended up spending about 6 days on the river after that. And it was we had some run-ins with the Coast Guard. We had some close calls with ships. We had some, the Plaquemines Parish Sheriff's Office was not thrilled at all that I had my kids on the river with us in this little 18-foot rowboat. And it was an adventure for sure.
Man, it's funny. I've only had this a few times, but I've met listeners now out just out and about at different canoe conferences, or people who listen to the podcast, even like you know, and you forget how much I talk, right? You forget how much I talk, and like things I like don't think that I even mention. I'll like drop offhandedly about my life, right? And then I'll talk to somebody who's listened to the podcast and they'll bring it up, and I'm like, oh man, like you are really listening, and like I even forgot I said that. And sometimes it's like they know me more than I realize I let on. And after reading your
Right.
book, I kind of and talking with you right now, I kind of have that feeling. You know, it's like you speak very similar to how you write, and you know, the
Oh, yeah.
story that you're saying is cool because like coming through in the book, it's just you know, it's not as it's a story, right? I mean, it's your life, but it's just like a book that I'm reading to entertain myself. But then when you describe it as
Right.
like your
Right.
actual life, it's kind of funny. It puts a little different perspective on it, so it's neat.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I heard a writer years ago, I don't remember who it was, said that a good book not both, a good book entertains, educates, and inspires. And so if it can do one of those things, it's a pretty good book. But if it can do all three of those things, if it can entertain, educate, and inspire, then that's what makes a great book. And really, I mean, I'm not, that's for other people to decide, but that's what I was aiming to do, was write something that was entertaining for someone that wanted a story. I've included a lot of historical stuff in there just because as a Memphis kid, like I've just always geeked out on Memphis or Mississippi River history. And so I wanted to include some of that stuff. And then of course, going through what I would call, a midlife crisis at the age of 40. I'm 47 now. And so, and I'm not sure how old you are, but turning 40 for me, especially because I started my adulthood, building boats and sort of going on these adventures and stuff. And then it wasn't until we had kids and had a mortgage and kind of settled down that I moved into more of a routine track. I worked at an architectural firm doing CAD drawings and stuff. But it brought us, health insurance, which we'd never had. It brought us a sense of security with regular paychecks and all that sort of stuff, kind of pulled us back from the precipice. But after a few years, turning 40 years old and having this just same routine every week, it really kind of broke me down in a way that I had never felt before. I never suffered from any kind of depression or anything like that, but it was a really dark place that I was in shortly after turning 40. And so I think that not just for me, but for me going on this adventure, but for other people, I just think doing those sort of things kind of gets you out of your head. It gets you out of your routine. It gets you out of whatever doldrums you could be in. And for me, it was, I don't want to say it was life-saving, but it definitely was sort of an inflection point where I was like, okay, no more. I'm not going to be complacent just sitting in this office and counting the days until retirement, because I want to feel like who I once felt like. And this trip kind of did that for me. And so the book was sort of, what do they say? It's sort of like a splinter. You just got to pull it out. So after the trip was done, it was just like, I have to write the book. It just felt like a splinter.
That's great, man. Kind of the same way, at least I felt, I imagine you felt too, about doing the trip in the first place. It's just like some weird pull that for whatever reason, you just have to build a rowboat and put it on the Mighty Miss and take her for a go. Huh?
Right. Right. And there's lots of people these days, especially with like the River Angels or the Mississippi River page or whatever it is on Facebook. There's a lot of people that want all of their questions answered before they ever go do it. What's the water level like? Do I need this size canoe? And how much food should I bring? But I know you've done the Yukon and the Mississippi, I believe, right? You've done some river trips. And I imagine you strike me as the kind of guy that you're just going to rely on your own, your own capacity, your own capabilities to sort of do the thing without being told everything that needs to go into it. It's sort of more fun to like jump off the cliff and yeah, exactly. That's the beauty of it, is like you kind of just jump off the cliff and build your wings on the way down sort of thing. You know, you just have to,
100%.
you know, nobody's going to be holding your hand. But now that being said, I think the River Angel thing is cool. We did it in 2002. And of course we weren't online. And so we didn't have access to that sort of thing. I think it's a blessing what those folks do. I do think there's a danger in becoming, not a danger, but becoming too reliant on that kind of stuff, having all your questions answered and all of that stuff in place before you go. It's just sort of like you're just never going to go if you have to have everything answered before you set out. But
I agree.
Yeah.
Few things to say on that. One is that, the other thing to it is I completely agree with you. But with that being said, there's a million ways to do it. You know, I sure as heck, not now at least, but maybe sometime down the line, I want to try and do some speed record thing. But that does not seem to jive with me at all right now. But for other people, that's their jam.
Right?
So
yeah, me neither. Yeah. I think that stuff's way cool. I follow those guys.
Yeah, exactly. I did too.
I lost you there.
Crazy. Oh, sorry. We're lagging a little bit, but can you hear me?
Oh, okay. I can. Yeah.
Okay, sweet. But the other thing I was going to say about building your wings on the way down. When I did the Mississippi, I did it in 2017, I think. And I always say when I started, man, I had no idea what I was doing, no idea really what I was getting into. And of course, as you know, in Minnesota, it's the Mississippi River. So you don't have any dams that you have to portage for the whole river, except for Minnesota before the locks and dams start, because you can go through the locks and dams, right?
Right.
So in Minnesota, I'm the heaviest that I ever was, because it was right at the beginning. Dude, I had a full acoustic guitar. I had two cast iron frying pans and a Dutch oven. I had like cutting boards. I had like all kinds of stuff, and
it sounds like you had a porta-john with you and a sink and everything.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's the fun of it, man. Is it's like you. And then once you get through, though, once you learn those things, one, about yourself, but two, about how to do this thing you're doing, I think that you get this sense of empowerment, this sense of like, if I can do this, I can do anything. Whereas if you're just following a paint by number kind of thing, following someone's instructions, it may not be as filling or empowering. But to your point about different ways of doing it, there's the speed thing. It's super cool. I follow those guys, but as far as like being a participant, that would not be my thing at all. I remember years ago, I was a deckhand racing on sailboats, and of course they just go around in a triangle, and we were on these these reservoirs here in the South, in Tennessee. And I remember not wanting to go around the marker and go back to the finish line. I just wanted, let's go around the bend. Like we've raced this triangle every weekend for a year. I just want to go around the bend and see what's coming up next. And so the speed thing has never been my thing, and I'm sure you found this when you were going down the river, there were a few other people going down the river in various ways. There was you meet them in the book. There was a duo, Jack and John, and they were on a raft that they had built. They spent no money on this raft. It was just barrels and pallets and tarps and chicken wire. And they built it in Minneapolis, and they were floating all the way down. So they're in this, just like the lock tender called them two hippies on a raft. He said, "Oh, you'll know them when you see them." And then that same trip, we went through another lock, and there was a guy named Martin Strell who was swimming the river that summer in 2002. and he's a Slovakian. And I'm sure you've heard of him. He swam, gosh, like the Danube and the Rhine and the maybe the
I gotta
Amazon.
talk to
Shoot, I
him.
don't know. Martin Strel has been all around the world swimming rivers,
Insane.
and there are other people who've done the Mississippi swimming since, but I think he may have been the first one to do the full. I mean, he went from Itasca to the Gulf, or at least the mile marker 0, but it just blew my mind. And then there's other people that have done it on stand up paddle boards, just all sorts of. I mean, it feels like you name it, somebody's gone down the river, and I'm sure somebody's gone down the river on a log before. I don't know.
Right. It's funny you said the two hippies on a raft, because I had the exact same experience in in where was it? I think it was near Carutheville, Missouri, if I'm saying that right.
Okay,
And
Caruthersville, yeah.
Brothersville, yep. And I was at the boat ramp there, and I saw
Mm-hmm.
something coming in from the distance. And by then, the river's big. Usually, with a canoe or kayak, though,
Uh-huh.
you can see the shimmer of that paddle as the paddle lifts, and like the movement
Yeah,
of the paddle. I didn't see any
yeah.
movement. And I was like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, "It doesn't look like a boat. It doesn't look like a canoe or kayak, but it's like moving like it is." And so I like got out my binoculars and I like look, kind of zoom in on them, and I'm like, I'll be damned. I think it's 4 pallets strapped together with a little outboard on the back. And
No,
it was,
really.
yeah, same thing. It was 3 Australians, and they had flown over, had built the raft in Bemidji, and
Okay,
all it
whoa.
was like 6 like oil drums, like the plastic chemical
Sure.
drums, the blue
Yep.
drums, 6 of them
Yeah.
in a
Yep.
row, so 12 of them probably in total, and then 4 pallets, and they had straps like ratchet straps, like that, like
Ratchet
you'd use
straps.
for trucking, that attached the pallets to the barrels, and then they had a little outboard on the back, and they had all their stuff in like plastic like Tupperware containers. And every time they moved, like anytime someone like took a step on the raft, like the whole thing would like, go in whichever way their
Oh,
weight
just
was on.
pitch.
Yeah, exactly. And I saw them
Yeah.
come over, and I was like, oh wow. And we hung out for a few hours. They were getting a resupply, and chatted up with them, and they were cool folk. But man, it was hilarious seeing them pull up like that. That thing is different.
That description is nearly identical to the platform. These two hippies on a raft, they had, just like you said, they had the blue, I don't even know, yeah, blue chemical drums or whatever they are. They had the blue drums. That was the flotation device. Then they had some pallets for the deck, but then they also had walls built out of pallets, and then chicken wire or mosquito netting or something around the pallets. And then they would, if it was raining, they would drop a blue tarp down. And they had an outboard, and I asked them if they were motoring, and they said, no, we only motor to get out of the channel if we see a towboat. Otherwise we're just drifting, which is how them having gone through a lock maybe as much as 2 weeks ahead of us, a week and a half ahead of us, we were able to catch up to them because we were rowing 8 hours a day. We hoisted the sail a few times, but as you know, being on the river, most of the winds during the summer are southwest. And so you have, even if it's not heavy, it's sort of a headwind. So we weren't really we sailed occasionally, but not very much. But yeah, we were able to catch up with those guys. And then there were 3 other guys. It's funny you mentioned Caruthersville, because that's where we met Che, Ben, and Luke. And seeing them in the distance, we were just drifting while we were eating lunch. And just like you said, I'm looking at this thing trying to figure out just what the hell it is. I thought it was a tree root or a tree with the roots sort of like sticking up out of the water. And then as it got closer, I saw that what I thought was the roots were their elbows pumping up and down while the 3 of them were paddling. And they had started, I think they started in St. Paul or or Minneapolis. And so we just rendezvoused by chance out there off of Caruthersville. And those guys stayed with my family in Memphis. And then so we camped with them that night. 2 nights later, we were both in Memphis and they stayed with us. The very next night when we left Memphis, we had an encounter, I would say, with a fisherman who'd had a little bit too much to drink, and he was a little too interested in my wife, who was wearing bikini bottoms at the time, and he was a little too interested in her, and he'd been drinking, and he pulled out a pistol, and we were sort of alone on a sandbar. And I just kept hoping that those guys in the canoe would come around the corner, because it was a pretty tight situation that we were in. And after that encounter, we did end up meeting with the canoeists again, and just decided from a safety standpoint that we would stay together. So Mandy and I, a crew of 2, and these 3 became a crew of 5, and we went from Cat Island, just across the Mississippi line, all the way down to New Orleans together as the 5 of us. So that made for, a little different experience doing it with we camped with them. Our rowboat was quite a bit faster than the canoe. So during the day we would row on ahead of them, we'd find a camp spot, and then they'd come paddling in an hour or so later. But yeah, it was a great experience, and I'm still in touch with those guys to this day. So I've made some lifelong friends that we just happened to meet by chance in the middle of the river off of Caruthersville. Yeah.
How did the pistol situation shake out?
Well, he had asked us if we were carrying any firearms, and we were not. And told him so. And I didn't know he had one at the time. And that's when he reached into his bag and he pulled out a 22. And he was couching it in terms of like, you've got to have protection out here. And then he asked my wife if she'd ever fired a pistol before. And she said, no, I haven't. And he said, you guys should learn how to shoot a pistol, or at least said to my wife, you should learn how to shoot a pistol. And he was trying to get us to go back in the woods, the wooded part of the island. He said, we can go back there and we'll have a little target practice. And I just kept trying to stall the guy. Again, he was a little bit drunk. But I mean, he was holding a pistol and I wasn't. And so I sort of, stuttered and made excuses for enough time that, I go into depth about the whole thing in the book, but miraculously, the trio in the canoe, who had, always sort of lagged behind us, they came paddling around the bend just at that moment. And what could have been, a pretty regretful situation turned into him jumping in his boat and speeding off across the river. And I go into, there's quite a bit of detail in the book about that specific instance, because that was really the first time. I know, you having done the river trip, is like the thing that amazes people time and time again is just the amazing generosity of people, and the sort of like open arms and open homes. I've been given the keys to people's car, as I'm sure you have too. And so after sort of just the benevolence we've been shown on the river by all these people, I think maybe, I don't know, I was a little naive or let my guard down or something, or didn't want to offend the guy when he first approached us. But that was really the first and only time that we ever met with anybody that had any kind of ill intent, or that I thought had ill intent. I mean, most of the time, sure, it's just this generosity that you don't really see in your day-to-day life. I mean, we sort of go around our day-to-day life at work and at home and stuff, and you try and be a good person, but you really see good people when you're on these extended adventures, because when people hear about it, I think they see a little bit of themselves in it, and it's something that they want to do. And if they can't do it, if they can assist you in some way, it's sort of, they have a part of your trip. And it was a pretty eye-opening thing how many just incredibly generous people were out there. I've told people, if you want to have faith in the world again, go on a long trip, and you're going to find way more great people than you are guys like this drunken fisherman on the sandbar. But yeah, that was really our only kind of encounter, but it changed. It sort of changed the way we viewed the trip, which is why the five of us decided, yeah, it's been cool hanging out with you guys. I really enjoy y'all's company.
Yeah.
And we sort of mutually decided to sort of team up as five and go down to New Orleans together. So
it's funny how you mentioned earlier how rivers in Memphis and in, you name it, a river town up and down the Mississippi, how they kind of went from being the front door and the life and the center of town and the center of activity to being forgotten and kind of being, the back door and the rear and kind of an afterthought, if you will, as highways were built, as traffic and commerce moved from the river to over the land. But there's still like the highways connecting us, and it's funny to think, you're out on this big wild river, and yet you run into people that you end up hanging out with and becoming lifelong friends with. And just, on your trip, you just happen to float up next to somebody that, ends up staying with your folks. And so it still is like a highway and still is like connecting and the lifeblood of America still, and it's weird how that works.
Yeah, it's almost like instead of instead of being the super highway that it was back in the day when it was like, that was everybody's front door and all the traffic was moving up and down the river. That's how, everything of any consequence was going up and down that river. It's shifted from being this super highway to almost being a back road. Now, not a back road to the barges and stuff like that, but to people, like when you go out there in a canoe or a rowboat or just a fishing boat or something like that, it's almost like it's almost like running into somebody else on a dirt road or something like that. It's way more rural than I expected most of the time. Growing up in Memphis, you're sort of surrounded with this, not industrial waterfront, but it's definitely a commercial waterfront. And, you get a couple of miles north or south of Memphis and all of a sudden you're in hardwood bottomlands that you can't see or hear a town from. It's kind of magical how quickly it turns into this sort of like green Eden. I just love being out there.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I say it often, but you think of wilderness, quote unquote wilderness, right? And you think of like the Appalachian Mountains, Yellowstone, Yosemite, and all these amazing, stunning places, which they all are amazing and stunning and big and vast and beautiful. But you don't think of like the Mississippi River or just like any river, but a river corridor. But when you're out there, even though there's barges and commercial traffic and all of that stuff is true, which obviously is not the case for like Yellowstone or something like that, it still feels, and it still is like a wild, just wilderness corridor running right through the heart of the country. That is just so, I guess it's just such an afterthought that it still blows my mind. Saying it now, it's just like a hidden gem right there, looking for so many populous areas of our country to just dip their toes in and say, hey, this is cool. It's not just a big old ditch,
Right. Yeah. And not just the Mississippi, really kind of any river, like you're mentioning. It's funny how you're talking about Yellowstone and the Appalachian Trail and stuff. And I've got friends and, they'll go on vacation to these, one of them loves Glacier National Park, and they'll go to all of these far flung, absolutely gorgeous places. But I mean, you're talking about a plane ride, a rented car, an Airbnb. You're talking about all of this extensive travel to get to these places that are quote unquote wild. And I mean, in our own town here, Thompson Station, just between here and Nashville, is the Harpeth River. And my daughter and I have done it's 115 miles. We've done the whole thing. And there were definitely stretches, like an entire day, where we wouldn't see another person. You might go under two overpasses that you're not seeing any houses. There might be some farms that it comes up against, but I think that I know that there are all of these sort of rural gems around us that we kind of ignore because Instagram or whatever other place tells us we need to go to this bucket list national park. And again, nothing against national parks, but I think that a lot of people can tend to want to go to those places and ignore the places that are right in their backyard. And everybody has those places. And I don't think it's just me. I think it's most people, because I think it's the human condition. As you get into those sort of wild places, and something inside you just calms. Something quiets and slows down. It's an important thing to keep as part of our lives.
Yes, 100%. I agree with that tenfold. And that is the other thing that canoeing, kayaking, and boating in general lends itself to so well, because you think of Yellowstone and these places, like you have to go hiking or backpacking and you need big, wide swaths of area to do it. But if you got a boat, a little canoe, a little kayak, go to your local stream, throw it in there. Nobody does it. It's there. It's open to anything.
Yep.
And like you said, and the other amazing part about it is, like, rivers are the lifeblood of any given valley or any given area, right? Like, all the animals have to come to the water to drink. All of the biggest trees and shrubs and all that stuff is along the river corridor where there's ample water. So it's like, if you travel in your local little river, you're really getting like you're going through the heart of your local little ecosystem. And it's just awesome.
It's like going to a local zoo. We were on the Harpeth and we saw these, I don't even know what they're called. There were these little turtles that I had never seen these turtles before. And they were, I don't know, maybe the size of a silver dollar or something like that. And you just see all kinds of critters and stuff down there. It really is sort of it sounds funny to call it a zoo, because that's something that's captured, but it is sort of it's like an encyclopedia of all the local flora and fauna, and you don't have to go to the zoo to see these exotic animals. You can see some pretty exotic animals that are not going to be in your suburban front or backyard just by going to a local river. And like you said about the trees, the trees that are down there, they're kind of beyond the reach of the loggers. And so that you've got these just massive trees in the bottomlands that sort of harbor all of that wildlife. And it's just, it's a special place. And I know you know it and I know it. But I do feel like it gets ignored, for these bigger places getting all the attention, all the Instagram, all that stuff.
I know it.
But,
yeah. What are there other rivers around you, or other river trips that you've done other than the Mighty Miss and the book that you've written about that pull at you?
Yeah, we did. So the Harpeth River is the one that runs from Rutherford County, runs about 115 miles and sort of wraps around Nashville before dumping into the Cumberland River. And a couple of years ago, when she turned 13, I thought it was time we did a grown-up trip, or a trip that would require a little more from her. And so we, with the help of the Harpeth River Conservancy, we rented one of those 360 Google Street camera or street view cameras. So it's like a 360 camera, and we rigged it up on a pole and had a solar panel sort of charging the battery on it. And we did the entire 115 miles of the Harpeth River, shooting tens of thousands of photographs on the way down. I'm embarrassed to say those pictures are still sitting on my computer. But the intent, as soon as I can find someone that is technologically advanced enough to help me, the intent is to upload those to Google Maps so that anybody in the world would be able to just drop a pin on the Harpeth River and pull up a 360-degree street view, quote unquote, of the Harpeth River, and basically just travel down the Harpeth the way that you would Highway 31 out here. And so we've
Awesome.
done that trip. I've threatened to take my son down the Duck River, which is another river around here. But after seeing how hard his sister had to work, he's not as interested. And he's also a little bit younger. But yeah, so we've got the Duck River, we have the Harpeth River.
It's funny you mention that.
What's
because I was gonna say that good on you for getting your daughter back out in a boat and on a camping trip after reading your book, and some of maybe her takeaways from the last stretch of the river there. But
Yes.
maybe I spoke too early. If your son isn't to a depth, maybe you didn't learn quite your lesson there. Maybe, Trapper.
Yeah, maybe not. Being on the Mississippi terrified Piper. That she was at the time, I guess 11. She was pretty scared some of the time that we were out there. But then when we got on the Harpeth and she saw, oh, okay, I can almost touch the bottom of this river, and we're the biggest boat out here in a 14-foot canoe, I think she was a little more at ease. However, the just hours and hours of paddling, because we tried to do it in 5 days or whatever it was to capture all these photos, and we could only paddle during the bright hours of the day, and anytime it rained we had to stop and cover the camera. And so it was she's definitely a girly girl, so being out there kind of roughing it was a test of her. It was a test of her her fortitude, maybe. I don't. I think I'm going to let her off the hook. I'm going to let her off the hook for with rivers for a while. She's done the Mississippi and she's done the Harpeth, but I do sort of harbor this hope that one day when she's in her early 20s or something, she'll look back and be like, damn, Dad took me on some cool trips, and sort of maybe those memories will sort of spark spark something in her, and she'll take on her own kind of crazy adventure.
I think that's how it goes with kids, man. That's certainly how I remember looking back on hikes that I did with my folks as a kid, like just thinking, man, what are we doing? We're just walking for nothing. But then looking back on it, I'm like, man, it kind of helped sparked my love for the outdoors. But B was like, yeah, we went to some pretty cool places. I guess that was cool.
Yeah. But at the time you're like, well, how do you win? We're not racing. We're just walking. This is not, how you can't win at this. But I don't know. Yeah. Hopefully our kids, pick up on our more favorable traits and ignore the less favorable ones.
So how long has Crooked Old River been out now? I know it was pretty recent, right?
Yeah. We had the book came out April 13th. So Saturday, very recently, just a little over a week ago. And we had a book launch party in Franklin. And so, like I mentioned, I'm a musician, so we did a little songwriters round beforehand. And then I did a slideshow. There's no photos in the book. Maybe there will be in a future edition, but it was, being a self-published author, it was a little much with the timing and everything to try and get all the photos and stuff. So there's not any photos in the book, but during the presentation, there were we did like a slideshow and a talk about the river. And I have talked to somebody since then in the last week, and he said, well, if you don't have pictures in the book, maybe in the future, either you could print one with the pictures, or you could have a QR code or something in the book that sent people to your website that would have all the pictures and stuff in there. Because I being a reader, I recognize how fun it is to read the book, and then you see the pictures of the characters and stuff that are being described. But that's a maybe for down the line. But yeah, the book came out a week ago. It's available on Amazon, because everything's available on Amazon. and it's also available on my website, which is just my name, trapperhaskins.com. So Amazon or trapperhaskins.com. And it's like I said, it's an author published book. So those are, we're not in any stores at the time, but, or at this time, but yeah, hoping to get it out to a broader audience. And,
That's awesome.
yeah, hopefully.
How did the process of writing it go? I know you said it was like a thorn taking out a splinter, but
Yeah.
just had to get it. But how did the process go? Is this? I imagine it's your first book, and what?
It is. Yeah, man, it took a lot longer than I expected. That's the first thing I would say. And being a musician, being a songwriter, I mean, I've been writing 3-minute songs since I was 12 years old. So trying to sit down and write a 280-page book, I thought, well, it's going to flex those same muscles. But I was not prepared for the the amount of time that it took. I thought you just wrote the book and the book was done. And well, you actually write the first draft and then you pass it off to an editor, and the editor says, well, this part's clunky. You should lose these paragraphs. This part's inspiring. You should build this part. You should lengthen this part of it. And then you go back and you rewrite the entire book using those, or you revise the book rather using that input. And then you pass it on to another editor who combs through it looking for inconsistencies and misspellings and all that kind of stuff. And, the whole thing took, it took quite a while, but I'm a goal oriented person. And so what I did when I first started writing this thing was I drew up one of those, those fundraisers will have like the little cartoon thermometer where they start filling it up with red all the way to the top. And so I figured the draft of the book, if I could just get 100,000 words down, that would be something to work with. And so I just came up with if I could write 333 words a day, that's 10,000 words a month. And that's 10 months to write 100,000 words. So if I could write 333 words a day on average, then I would have a first draft done in 10 months. I was a little behind on that. It took me about a year to write the first draft. But yeah, it's one of those things where, not so different from being on the river. If you start off on the Mississippi and you're just, all you can think about is mile marker 0, it's just going to torture you. But if you can think about the mile that you're on, okay, I just need to get to Coffee Pot Landing. I just need to get to Bemidji. If you have these small milestones, several months later, you look up and, oh my God, look how much ground I've covered. And so that was sort of the process. Was I just need to, I'll get overwhelmed and possibly want to walk away from this thing if I start thinking about how many words I have yet left to write. But if I can just focus on 333 words today, eventually I'm going to get to that first draft. But what I was not prepared for at the end of the first draft was just how many revisions and rewrites and editing and stuff there was. Because as a songwriter, you sort of write the song, and I mean, you may go back and tweak a word here or there, but writing a song seems more explosive, I think, than writing a book. And writing the book is more just methodical day after day, and just trying to keep to the plan. So yeah, so my first book, and it's a whole lot of lessons learned, but I hope we got a good one out there for people to read.
Yeah, man. Well, I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I still have to go through the some of the middle parts of the book. I read through like the first several chapters, put it down for a little bit, and then knew I had your convo coming up, and read 12 through 15, and yeah, I've really enjoyed it. And yeah,
good,
man, your writing style is great. So yeah, I hope it goes well. And yeah, I enjoyed reading it. So again, Crooked Old River, Rowing Toward Redemption on the Mississippi, trapperhaskins.com or Amazon, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's where to find it.
Awesome.
And then I'm on social media, on Instagram, just like you. It's just at Trapper Haskins on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, or if you want to connect and talk about the river or any of the things that you read about in the book that you may have questions about. I'm an open book. I'm happy to answer anybody's questions about the experience.
And how about the music stuff? You're on Spotify, you're on other places where people listen to music. Give me a little background about your
Sure.
music. background?
Yeah, I started playing when I was probably 9 or 10 years old. And then started writing terrible songs very, very soon after. And then, poor attempts at it as a teenager. And we did not move to the Nashville area for music. My wife is originally from Franklin, just south of Nashville. And so when she got pregnant with our first, we moved down here, which is convenient to be near Nashville and be a musician. But yeah, I am. I had a band called Trapper Haskins and the Bitter Swill for a while, and now I'm just solo, so it's just Trapper Haskins. But the music's on Spotify, the music is on YouTube. I've got a couple of I've got a vinyl record out that came out right at the beginning of COVID, which as a musician who was touring around was absolutely just the most inopportune time. The album came out on April 17th, 2020, right before all the venues closed down. All of our promotional shows got canceled. And so we just didn't pick it up after that. Didn't do much touring. It sort of cut us off at the knees, but I've got vinyl records, and you can listen to the music on Spotify. But if you're a vinyl head, I've definitely got Blood and the Honey on vinyl, and some of my earlier records are just on YouTube and on Spotify. So, and I do I probably play half a dozen shows a year, but I'm not with kids that are active in baseball, travel baseball, and I run a woodworking business. So I'm not. I used to tour regionally. I don't do that nearly as much. In fact, none at all right now. Just playing locally, maybe 4 to 6 times a year. But other than that, focusing on
Awesome.
on building some houses and writing some books. That's sort of where we're at these days.
That's great, man. Well, hey, I really enjoyed our conversation, man. I'll wind her down here, but anything else we didn't hit on that you want to get out there?
Not really, but I would encourage people that that are struggling with something, whether that's depression, or in the book I get into it wasn't so much depression, it was just like anxiety and really kind of this existential dread about where my life was heading. I would encourage those people to, at the very least, get out of their house and go do something that puts your mind in the natural world and gets your thoughts out of your own head. And if you need therapy or medical help, to pursue that too. And again, those are things I'm happy to talk about. If anybody wants to hit me up on social media, and I get into that kind of stuff, I get into that topic a lot in the book, the latter part of the book. I get into the reasons that drove me back to the river. And yeah, man, life can be hard. So be good to each other.
Amen, man. Yeah. One of the, I picked up a couple lines from your therapist, I suppose, from the end of the book that I really liked. And one of them was how, about the paradox of life, how, what I write down here, perpetual comfort is miserable, which is just the strangest thing
Perpetual
because,
comfort is miserable. Right.
like you want to strive, you always want to strive, you're always trying to be comfortable and, strive to be settled and to have everything you want and just to be in a good flow and a good zone. But yeah, I mean, even just like for whatever reason, that mind, that line conjures up like the royal family, and like just how like the brother and sister of royal families like have everything, but yet they can still be in the dumps and still be like, down and not happy. And like, they just have the most comfortable plush life, but doesn't necessarily mean anything if you don't have a little challenge. Right.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, that he did say that to me, and I felt the need to include it. Yeah, perpetual comfort is miserable. I just feel like we're sort of meant to, life's kind of a struggle, but I think we're meant to struggle for something. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah,
something
man.
meaningful.
All right, Trapper.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's leave it at that. Appreciate the convo. TrapperHaskins.com. Go check out Crooked Old River and take it easy, man. Hopefully we can connect sometime down the line, go for a paddle or play some tunes or talk about some rivers again sometime.
Right on. Will, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
And there you have it. That's episode 87 with Trapper Haskins on Buffalo Roamer Outdoors. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget, give us a 5-star rating and leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcast if you enjoyed the episode. Also, join me on a guided canoe trip this summer on a Mississippi River adventure. Got 2 spots open for July on the Mighty Mississippi, a 3-night, 4-day canoeing adventure. Have several spots open for other guided canoe trips as well. Check that out at buffaloroamer.com or give me an email for more details or to book your spot. That's will@buffaloroamer.com or buffaloroamer@yahoo, either way. What else? Thank you to sregear.com and Fischel Paddles, makers of fine handcrafted wooden canoe paddles, and sregear.com, family owned and operated outdoor gear shop. Use discount code WILL at both of those sites. And without further ado, we'll take this one out with a original song from Trapper Haskins. He's available at Spotify, YouTube, any place you listen to music. And this one is called In the Boot Heel of Missouri by Trapper Haskins. Thanks. Take it easy. Get outside. Get some fresh air. We'll see you downriver.
Come west from Bristol, skin like porcelain and eyes like crystal. Brother shot her down with my own pistol. She wouldn't lie with him, wouldn't lie with him. And he had fists like bricks and arms like lumber. Bite like lightning, bark like Texas thunder. God forgive my soul, I laid him under. My own twin, my own sin. Said I shed no tears for brother or Belinda. It was a time when I was quite a heller. I put my fist right through that plate glass window. Didn't feel a thing, but this scar remains.